Hello and welcome to another episode of Magic Connections. My name is Andrew Lee and it's great to be back. For those of you who are watching this for the first time, Magic Connections is about sharing the mystery with magicians from all over the world. We hope to inspire one another during these crazy times. We create magic, we create memories, and most importantly, we connect magicians from the east to the west. And we are back. Have you ever wondered what is the biggest failing of most magicians? Why don't they make it to the top? You are about to find out. Our guest for the night needs no introduction. He is one of the most influential magicians and cardinals in the business. He is recognized worldwide as one of the greatest living magicians. Please put your hands together and welcome Michael Ammar. Joining me tonight also is co-host from Singapore and good friend Jeremy Tan.
Hello, my friends. Nice to see you.
Hello,
Thank you-
Michael.
thank you for
again,
having me.
for joining us.
Hello,
Well,
Michael.
it's a pleasure, Jeremy. So nice to see your setup. Look at that, Jeremy, official studio.
Yeah, his setup is so good and it's so. I like the whole like the ice and fire kind of a thing. Nice contrast to the colors.
Yes.
It's very like nicely
Yes.
balanced
Yeah.
out. Yeah,
Thank you.
Creating the illusion of professionalism.
and he even had the customized backdrop of your face there with the session that we're having today.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, I thought you had it like that all the time, no?
Just a mural, yeah.
So good. So I mean, I'll start off with the first question. For you, Michael. How has the art of magic evolved for you over all these years till today?
Well, the thing about magic is, as I look back over the last 40 years or so, is just the industry changes, every 5 or 10 years. And you really have to be nimble as a performer to be able to adjust to the new situations. Back in the 80s, there really wasn't very many places to perform close up professionally, except for maybe restaurants or something like that. Slowly, the trade show industry started to develop, and that became a lucrative place to perform in the 80s. But there were no comedy clubs during the 80s. It was really kind of after dinner performances or conventions, that sort of thing. But then in the 90s, there was a comedy club explosion. There were 5,000 comedy clubs around the U.S., and you had to have a comedy act to be able to really tour and do that sort of thing. And trade shows became very lucrative. That's when the internet and the .com stuff was taking place, and everybody was trying to advertise at these trade shows. But by the end of the 90s, comedy clubs had collapsed and basically disappeared, except for maybe one or two in every city. And trade shows disappeared because of the internet. They started saying, well, we don't need to go and spend all this money to appear live at a trade show. We've got a website and people can visit our website. And so then it changed to kind of corporate magic and private parties. But then, 2007, 2008, we had this banking collapse. And so all this corporate work kind of disappeared and it became a different thing. After that, 7 or 8 years ago, trade shows started to come back. And because people started saying, well, everybody's got a website. Turns out it's nice to meet people live. So trade shows kind of started to come back. But then private parties, people quit having private parties in their homes. And here it is, 2020, and there are no live performances anyplace. I mean, so to survive through all this sequence, and the other collapse, interestingly enough, when Roy of Siegfried and Roy got attacked by the tiger, when that happened, there were magicians in every hotel in Las Vegas. There were 300 or 400 magicians living in Las Vegas, and they were all performing at all these different venues in Las Vegas. But when Roy got attacked by that tiger, they closed down the show at the Mirage. And basically every hotel started canceling the magicians. And it got to where there's only like 3 or 4, there was Copperfield, Penn and Teller. Lance Burton continued for a few years after that, but then he retired. So a lot of those guys that had a 10-minute act that could plug into a variety show quit having any place to perform. I mean, some really great performers were having to get real jobs because there just wasn't outlets for these acts.
Wow.
So it's really been an interesting evolution over the last 40 years. And now with the Zoom shows and stuff like that, personally, I've resisted going to the Zoom shows. I always felt like, when magic goes from 3D to 2D, part of the soul pops out of it. I feel like, and there's things that matter in a live show. To be astonished, I think, depends on belief. You have to really believe a certain situation is so. You have to really believe the coin is in their hand to be surprised when it's not. You have to really believe the bag is empty to be surprised when something comes out of it. You have to really believe it's a regular shuffle deck to be impressed when the guy finds your signed card.
This is so
you start
nostalgic.
taking
It's like
all of
watching
those
your
things out.
DVDs like from the past, hearing you saying these things over again from watching your DVDs and
It's
learning
a
magic
little
back
deja vu.
then.
Well, so I tried to think of a good example of why I resisted the Zoom shows, and here's the closest metaphor that I can think of is that I love sushi, and a few years ago we say, oh, there's sushi in the grocery store. We can buy it while we're buying groceries. We can get some sushi and take it home. That's not as good as sushi in a sushi bar because it's been sitting there all day. It's, but it was convenient. So we started eating sushi from the grocery store. But after 2 or 3 months, I came to the conclusion, sushi is not as good as I thought it was, and so we quit eating sushi. But then I was traveling someplace after a couple of years and, here's a sushi bar. Well, we might as well go in. And it was delicious. Oh, I get it. It's grocery store sushi that's not good. Not, fresh sushi is great. But and to a certain extent, I think that's what it's like with Zoom magic shows. They're just not quite as good as the live show. And my concern is if people get used to the idea, well, this is what magic is like. They see a few of these Zoom shows, they say to themselves, magic's not as good as I thought it was, and without realizing, it's just the Zoom shows that aren't as good. The live shows are still great. Yeah, you just have to see a live performance. So that's my concern, is that people will start to think that that's what the live experience is like, which is completely different. And, so there's certain elements that they have to believe. I think they can't feel like they're just watching a YouTube clip. People don't get astonished when they watch these YouTube clips, so they have to know it's live and they have to know it's real time. They have to know there's really interactive stuff. I mean, there would be rules for making a good Zoom show, I would imagine. Although I haven't really delved deeply into it, that was just my concerns about the medium and about the compromises that you have to make in order to be able to perform without somebody being right there. I think teaching is as good. There are guys that are teaching classes online and doing private lessons and things like that. And I think that instructions are as good. You can even take advantage of some of the things that the medium can do. You can play a little video clip. You can do a little slow motion. You can do the over-the-shoulder stuff, and they see a better view of it. So, I think there's things that work okay in this situation, but there's things that are real compromises. And my hope is that, I don't know, if all this goes on another 6 months, you may see me doing Zoom magic shows, just desperate
Let's hope not,
to
man.
do something.
I mean, you're right. Zoom shows literally feel different for a fact that when I first started doing them, it totally takes away the interaction, and at the same time, you have to come up with material that now has to suit a virtual environment. I can't possibly ask you to, okay, now I'm going to have you shuffle the cards. I want to show,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of over-proving going on, and all that kind of stuff, which takes away from the magic, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So yeah, so you have to somewhat, tailor the shows to a virtual kind of environment.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very important. Yeah.
And the selection of the material you're going to end up doing, it makes a big difference. And I had a session with Franz Harari about a month ago online, and he was telling me how when he does his stuff, Franz Harari makes the Taj Mahal disappear in Diamond Head and produces the space shuttle and everything like that. He says the whole effort in going into those is proving to the audience that this is what it would look like if you were here. I mean, they all assume clearly this must be a camera trick. Clearly this must be some kind of, special effect. So whole effort revolves around trying to show you this is really happening. This is a real camera. That's a real thing. This is the point of view. Here's some helicopters flying overhead. Here's some people standing here. Here's a live, so all the effort goes into just, he says, performing the magic is just a simple, tiny part of it. But all of the effort has to go into saying, okay, believe me, trust me, this is what it looks like. This is real. This is that kind of thing. So I imagine the same thing would be true of the virtual shows.
For me, the most important thing about virtual shows is the ability to still connect with the audience. I think the magic is not that important, but the ability to look at everybody on the screen and call them out and, oh, can you help me with this? Name a card, that kind of stuff. That's right.
Yeah.
I think that's the element that I feel is more important than the magic itself.
Exactly.
You could perform something like an invisible deck, but now you can have, you can call that person's name to name a color, think of a suit, that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And then you go around. So I think the interaction part is more important than the magic, to be honest.
Well, last week, some guy showed me some reaction shots, just because I guess he's recording everybody's individual reactions, and later you can go back and see how they reacted to different things. And, he made a little montage of some of the reaction shots. And these were reactions that I didn't think that you could get through a Zoom show. There were really people, what? Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Those aren't things that you imagine people doing when they're watching YouTube. There's this, and yet they were reacting that way to the live Zoom show. And I think that just their ability to appreciate the reality of it is changing as well. They're really, they seem to be willing to accept the compromises that have to happen. But if it's real and it's live and you are talking to individuals and they're participating in whatever way they can, that it still seems to be doing okay. I was impressed by this reaction.
So, speaking about all this, now that magic is so easily accessible, you can find all sorts of magic from YouTube and all that kind of thing. What are your thoughts about people exposing and learning magic on these kind of social media platforms?
Yeah, the exposure is really weird. And it's interesting. I remember the first time when I was performing some strolling magic, when a group that I had performed for earlier and now I'm over here doing some other stuff. Comes up to me, and they've got their cell phone. They go, we found out how that trick was done.
Oh my
You
gosh.
know, they'd searched online. Well, I'm still performing. You know, these guys are doing this, and they come over and they show me that they found out how it was done.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, wow, that's, well, that's pretty much right. Well, let me show you another one. See if you can figure this one out. And so I performed a few other things for them. And at first it really bothered me. But once I realized, it's not going to go away, I started to look at those people in a different way. Those people are more curious. They're, and I started saying to people that, hey, if you're curious enough to go look to find out how it's done, you should learn a few things. Learn a few tricks that you can perform yourself. You might find that you really enjoy doing this, because they're almost beginners. Once they kind of cross that line to find out how something is done, if they're curious enough about it. And really, it changes what the structure of magic has always been about secrecy and having to discover these things. And just now there are no secrets. You can find the secret to almost anything online if you're curious enough about it. Somewhere there's information on it out there. So it changes the dynamics of that whole, the backbone of what magic is. It's about secrecy, and they don't know how it's done. Now, and I think it's almost like there are magic books in the library. And if somebody's curious enough, they can go to the library and they can find these books and they can read how some of these things are done. So the secrets have kind of always been out there, but now they're just a little bit more accessible. Yeah, it's a little bit more accessible because now all you got to do is this, and you can search for it. But there's secrets to everything that's out there. But there's an avalanche of information on everybody's true interests. If you like to fish, there's an avalanche of information on fishing. If you like to sew, there's tons of new information on that. So it's almost like it is still at the library, but it's even more buried because now there's a mountain of information on everything that you have to filter through to decide, I'm going to go look into this and learn a little bit of this. So it's not as bad as I feared it was going to be, because there's, if you want to learn the secret to Colonel Sanders, chicken and his 14 secret herbs and spices, that's online. You can find that. And if you want to find the secret recipe to Coca-Cola, that's online. You can find that. But I don't know what it is because I haven't bothered to go look for it. I got other things to think about. And to a certain extent, it's something like that. All secrets are out there. You just have to care enough about it to go searching for it. And if you do care that much about it, maybe you care enough about magic to hire a performer. Maybe you care enough about magic to become a beginner and to learn a few things yourself and that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's like everything. There's pros and cons to it. But the worst parts of it, I don't think are as bad as I had feared it was going to be. Now everybody can learn how this stuff is done. It's true, but not everybody cares. And 98% of the people don't care enough to go study about it. So it's still valid stuff.
But there are also a lot of bad magic that's out there, or bad magicians who are not workers, or they're just teaching the technique and all that kind of stuff. Wouldn't it in future bring out a generation of average magicians? They don't learn from proper teachers.
That was my fear. That was my fear. But there's I see a lot of these new young guys in Magic, and they're really good. So it's it has some of that going on. You have people learning from bad teachers, and they're limited about how good they could be. But yet there's also smart guys out there that can tell the difference between what's good and what's not good, and they seek the good stuff, and they become really good magicians. I mean, there's no question that there's some really smart guys out there, young guys that grew up with that access to the internet, and they grew up being able to watch as many YouTube clips as they wanted, and yet they decided, I want to be really good at this, and that was really I'm encouraged by it.
What separates an okay magician compared to a great magician?
Well, a surprising number of performers, I think, don't really understand what a good effect is, and really understand what an audience might be thinking at any given time. I'm surprised sometimes when I see performers who seem to be oblivious to how the audience is reacting to what they're doing. They just concentrate so much. I just got to do this. I got to do this. That they're not paying attention to whether or not people care, or whether they're bored, or whether they're offended by what they're saying, or anything like that. And so they're just not aware of the reactions that they're generating. There was a book. This goes back maybe 70 years ago. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics. And what it was about was was the idea that around World War II, we wanted to develop the ability to launch a missile and have it hit a moving target. Okay. And they realized we can't hit a moving target unless we build in some sort of feedback loop. Here's where you are in relation to the target. Here's where you are in relation to the target. You can't pre-program it and just launch it, because this guy is moving, and he moves a little bit, maybe speeds up or slows down. So they realized a cybernetic feedback unit has to be part of the program. You have to be able to see how you're doing in relation to what you want to hit. And I think that's true of a performer. You have to have a well-developed feedback loop, that you've rehearsed what you're going to do well enough to where you don't have to think about what you're doing. You're able to think about what the audience is experiencing, and what they're reacting to, and what they're looking at, and what they care about, and what they don't care about. So I think that's part of the element is that there's a lot of performers who are just so focused on getting it right and doing it that they shut down that whole feedback mechanism, and they go on too long, or they tell jokes that aren't funny, or they say things that offend people, and they're just unaware of it. I think that's part of what goes on. That's a big part of it.
So you've got a question here from Ayman Hafiz. He says that you are a walking encyclopedia of magic. What are your top 3 go-to magic tricks that you perform?
Oh, well, that might be in terms of like if I were strolling, for example, what 3 tricks might I take in that situation? Well, I find the rubber bands to be really good, and maybe the ambitious card, maybe, the sponge rabbits, so I might, hey, have you guys had your crazy man's handcuffs? I'm giving these out to everybody. These are free of charge. Oh, I'll show you what I can do with them. And then do a couple of tricks with it. And then say, well, people know I'm a magician. They wonder, if I'm going to produce a rabbit, and I do have some rabbits. It's just they're small and fluffy and sponge, and they're easier to travel with. They don't, mess in my pocket or anything like that. And here, hold one of those, and now you get a big reaction, and you put them away. And well, one more thing with the deck of cards here: shuffle, examine, make sure they're all real. Take any card you want, sign your name on the face of it. Now let me show you this thing. And maybe end with the card on ceiling or something like that to conclude the ambitious card, and then move on would be like a little performance set that I would travel, do strolling magic with. But when it comes to what do I put in my pocket if I'm going out, first of all, I don't feel compelled to perform at the drop of a hat. There was a time when I felt like if somebody finds out you're a magician, they're going to say, well, show me a trick, and you ought to show them a trick. But I got to where I didn't feel like that was necessary at all times. I have friends that are dentists, and if they're at a social party and somebody says, what do you do? I'm a dentist. They don't go, hey, I have a thing with my teeth. Can you take a look at my mouth real quick? Or if they're a singer, nobody says, well, can you sing some songs for us? They don't feel compelled to say, well, okay, let me sing something for you. So I got to where I didn't feel like it was essential that I perform just because they know I'm a magician, but so I don't travel. I don't go out with a deck of cards, and because there are certain things, if you go around carrying a deck of cards or a set of cups or something like that, it's obvious you want to perform in that situation, and you came ready to perform in that situation. I'm much more comfortable acting like I didn't bring anything. But like if I go to a cocktail party and I know I'm going to want to do some magic, if the topic comes up, I might take 8 or 10 rubber bands, and I would leave them in different places around the room, and so if it comes up, they go, oh, well, why don't you do something for us? Do something for us. I didn't bring anything, but here's some rubber bands. Here, let me show you something. I can do something with some rubber bands for you. And then it looks like I'm being spontaneous and not trying to be the life of the party, that kind of thing. Another one, like the little hand, it doesn't look like you've brought a prop. Oh, here, I've got a coin. Let me show you. I can do a little, really simple, quick thing with a coin for you. And then it's a surprise appearance. Another one of my favorites in that situation, maybe I'll take a thumb tip, and do the bill switch, to be able to say, well, you know what, I didn't bring anything at all with me, but if you got a dollar bill, let me show. I can show you something really cool with a dollar bill, and then maybe do the inside out dollar or something like that, and leave it with them. And those things make it look like I didn't intend to perform. And didn't come hoping someone would ask me to perform, but it looks like I'm just kind of being spontaneous in that situation. Dai Vernon told me once years ago, he said he never performs if somebody asks him to perform just once. He says, a lot of times they don't know what else to say. Oh, you're a magician? Oh, do a trick for me. It doesn't really mean that they want to see a trick. They just don't know what else to say, And so if you say something, well, if the time is right, I can do something for you later on. Let's see how the evening goes or something like that. He says he usually waits till somebody is asked 2 or 3 times to see a trick. He says if they ask you 3 times well, are you going to do something or not? Okay, let me show you something. Now they really want to see a trick, But just because they say, show me a trick, it doesn't always necessarily mean they want to see a trick. They don't know what else to say. As well as just how did you do that? they don't necessarily want to know how you did it. They don't know what else to say, and so you just need something to say to cover that point. Oh, wow, very well, thank you. And so it's in social situations, there are reflexive comments that aren't necessarily meant to be taken literally, and it's just a reflexive comment.
So, of course, everybody would like to hear a lot of stories from yourself learning from Dai Vernon. How is that for you? As a mentor and as a friend, tell us a little bit about that. And then I have a special request for a story later on, which I heard from at the Aaron Fisher's convention, which I absolutely love, and I'll request for it later. But do tell us.
Oh, okay. Well, the professor. The interesting thing about the beautiful thing about the professor, really, by the time I got to meet him, he was in his 80s, and he had gotten to the point where he really would tell people whatever he thought. And if he thought you were doing bad magic, he would tell you that's terrible, that's awful, you should get out of magic. Wow. I mean, he would really be cruel sometimes to people, but telling them the truth, and so it was very good, knowing that he's really going to tell you whether something is good or not good, and I had something. I had a Houdini coin where it shows Houdini in handcuffs. And I would say, watch here, Houdini is going to escape from the handcuffs and just leaving the handcuffs behind. And here's a tiny little pair of handcuffs that he was wearing, and I did this for the professor. I go, what do you think? And he goes, wow, that's very novel, very novel, and just saying it in a way it's like, okay, so I shouldn't do that trick. Okay, I got it. And I don't want to just be, wow, that's very novel, and yeah, there was, the very first time that I ever went to the Magic Castle, I'd already known the professor for a couple of years. I'd seen him in a few conventions, and whenever he would appear at a convention, I would go to the convention and try to get to know him and show him some stuff. And so this was 1980, and I was appearing at the Magic Castle the very first time. They performed Monday through Sunday. So this was Sunday afternoon. I arrived the day before. I want to go see what the room looks like and all this. And have you been to the Magic Castle? Either one of you?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I have.
Yeah. And you know how you kind of walk down this hallway and down the stairs, and there's the palace, and once you go upstairs,
gallery.
And that's downstairs. Then you go upstairs, and there's a hallway, and that's where the parlor and the palace is over in this area. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking down this hallway to where the parlor and the palace is. And I can hear the professor's voice. It's Sunday afternoon. It's about 3 or 4 o'clock. So everybody had kind of left. And the professor is yelling at some guy. Really yelling at some guy. Wow, this is weird. And I go down the stairs and I turn the corner and the professor's going, no, it was awful. It was the worst, And the guy was saying, well, but didn't you hear everybody laughing? No, they were laughing at you. They were they weren't laughing with you. They were laughing at you. Get out of magic. Just do us all a favor. Get out of magic. Become a juggler or something. Become a mime. But you are the worst. The worst. No, wait, no. No, there's one other guy. But you are the second worst magician I've ever seen in my life. Which just seemed like the worst possible cut that you could play. Wait, no. Okay, there was one other guy. But you are the second worst magician I've ever seen in my life. And I'm just walking up as he's saying this, and he turns to go, oh, hello, Michael. I'm coming to see your show tomorrow. No. Give me 3 or 4 days to kind of hit my stride. but the guy clearly had wanted the professor's opinion and had, kind of cornered. But by that time, the professor probably had several drinks and was just in the mood to tell him exactly what he thought.
Where were you in magic when you met the professor, when you learned from the professor? Were you already performing professionally?
Yeah, I'd been performing for a couple of years when I started to become aware of who he was. And then to hear he was going to appear at this convention, the Las Vegas Desert Magic Seminar. Him and Slidini were going to, I can't believe this. You can actually go to a convention and meet these people live. And boy, as soon as I got there, I would, where is this guy? Oh, this is the guy. Hey, and I would just kind of hang around. And eventually, oh, hello, or who are you? And I would introduce myself and, well, show me a trick then. And I would do some magic for him. And after meeting him then I met him the next year in New York and then again later at the Desert Magic Center. So I'd met him 3 or 4 times. But he started to know who I recognized me because I'm a young kid and I'm trying to show him good magic and whenever he would say make some comments about it, I always made a point of, even that night, going back to the room and trying to modify it and then show it to him the next day to show him that I'd taken his advice into consideration. And I think that he noticed that I was willing to listen and willing to try and improve what I was doing. And it was just a matter of just hanging around him enough to where he got to recognize me and I would always make a point of spending as much time with him as I could. Mm-hmm. And, looking back on it, and now being in a certain position, I appreciate it when these young magicians come up to me and show me something and it looks like they're really serious and they're going to do a good job, because I've seen some of those guys grow up and become great magicians. So now I'm really tuned into it. And if somebody young comes up and shows me, hey, I'm really serious about magic, I'm really devoting some time to it, hey, I give them all the time I can because I realize you're probably going to grow up and be in magic for the rest of your life, and I would rather be one of the guys that tried to help in some way than being the guy that was a jerk and didn't, want to give me the time of day,
Okay.
Oh, wait, there was one other story about the professor when it comes to this guy just really wanted his opinion that I thought was funny. We were sitting outside the close-up room, as you just go in and there's the fireplace and over here's was where the professor always liked to sit. Mm-hmm. And it was Sunday evening and a guy comes out and goes, Professor, there's 2 empty seats. I've tried to get you into my show all week. I'm dying to have your opinion on some of the things I'm doing. If you two can, come in and see my show right now, it would just mean the world to me. All right. And so the professor and I go in to sit down and watch this guy's show. And the professor fell asleep almost immediately.
Oh my gosh.
And the close-up room, if somebody's sleeping in the front row,
wow.
to miss them. I mean, you're 3 feet away from the guy. And I would try to wake him up, and go back to sleep. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what is this guy going to say? And so the show is over and we go back out and I'm thinking, whoa, what does he want to say? And so after the audience leaves, the guy comes out and goes, Professor, I can't believe it. Every night I've asked you to come in and see my show because I wanted your opinion. I wanted your genuine opinion. And you come in, you fall asleep through the whole show. And the professor, it's like he did miss a beat. He goes, well, sleep is an opinion, means it in the nicest way.
Oh, that's funny. So, I mean, Michael, what is the biggest failing of most magicians? Why don't they make it to the top?
Well, I do think one classic mistake is that they really they don't figure out who they are. They don't really find their own inner voice and try to amplify who they really are, and become unique for who they are. Walt Disney, one of his famous quotes is, what did he say? He said, "The more like you are, the less like anybody else you can be." Right? So if you really find out who you are, automatically it's going to be original and it's going to be creative. And it's just so easy to buy really good tricks and to try to perform them exactly the way the creator did it. And that's important. The first step in learning anything is imitation. You're going to imitate what you saw. But that's just a stepping stone. Some people consider that the goal. I'm able to do this as well as the guy who created it can do it. And yet that's still, it's not a stepping stone to something else. They consider it a stopping stone. I'm going to stop right here because I figured out how to do it as good as the creator did. And so they don't keep asking themselves, is this representing who I am in an authentic way? Am I being genuine to who I am and where I've come from? And when the people that draw caricatures, they try to find one quality about a person and kind of blow that out of proportion. And so that it's recognizable, and to a certain extent, that's what you're doing as a performer. You're almost doing a caricature of yourself. You're finding certain things about yourself that you can blow up and exaggerate to make them recognizable, and to give people a kind of a handle to hold you on. And I think it's just really tough to say to yourself, I'm going to create my own presentations, my own deliveries, my own effects, and I'm going to, put an original frame around it that I take out into the world. So I think that's part of what's going on. And the other part is just there's a lot of performers that just don't listen to their audiences. They don't really pay attention to what's working and how to do what they're doing better. I think this isn't exactly related to it directly, but a lot of them rehearse in front of the mirror, thinking that this is the ultimate feedback. I'm watching myself in the mirror, but really, if you only rehearse in front of the mirror, it develops bad habits. At the beginning, you kind of see how it's done, and you see how it's done, but then you start to blink when you do it. And you say, okay, now I don't see it anymore, and you haven't gotten better. You just learned to blink at the same time. So now you go out into the world and you're performing, and people are saying, hey, I saw how he did that. And you go, yeah, and he's got a twitch too. So I think, one of the earliest things I did, I got a Playboy magazine and I find this beautiful woman and I cut out the eyes. And I put the eyes on the mirrors, so that I would train myself when I'm rehearsing to look in their eyes when I'm doing the move, and smiling. I just think of the rest of the picture, and I smile, and and I just felt like that was a better training for learning what to do when you really perform magic. And so I don't perform a lot in front of the mirror. Sometimes I perform in front of an empty room. I try to find, if I find a big room and, here, I'm going to perform the cups and balls in this big room and
Wow.
try to project to these far corners of the room. You know, when you get used to a mirror here and this feedback all the time, you know, and then you go out and you stand in front of a big room, you feel naked. You don't have that feedback. You know, I think it's better to perform in that, to rehearse in that situation, so that when you have it, and now there's people in it, you're still delivering in this broader, bigger performance thing.
Yeah. It's
So
like
I
what
think
Jeff
that,
would do as well, right? Jeff would perform for the
yeah,
mask.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Jeff is, you know, a classic example for all of us, Jeff McBride. I mean, I met Jeff, it was in 1980. When I first met Jeff McBride, and even then he was way ahead of the pack, and doing this beautiful magic, and I got him booked at his first magic convention. I don't know if he remembers that, but I got him booked at the New York Magic Symposium during their first year, and he rocked the house and became a regular at the future magic symposiums. But yeah, I mean, Jeff is great. Jeff is great.
You did. So, for example, when you perform cups and balls for like a really large audience, and I'm asking because it is also an issue for me. On cruise ships, we have smaller venues. So apart from my theater show, we also can go into lounges and do our 45, 30-minute show. And only in the lounges will I do the cups and balls, not in the theater. I would really love to do the cups and balls in the theater, but I feel that it's more intimate and they can see me without a projection, without a video camera that projects me on the big screen. What are your thoughts on that? Is it okay to have them project on a big screen?
Well, yeah, I try. You know, the thing about performing with big screens is most people put the big screens over to one side, to the side. And so now you're there watching live and the guy's right there, but this is a bigger image. Should I watch over there? And I think the only person that I saw doing the big screen thing in an effective way was Juan Tamariz. And he would have a giant screen behind him and he's sitting in front of it. Performing, so you're still looking at one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're watching him and his body energy and his his personality, but you're also seeing a close-up of what the table looks like, and here's what's happening on the table. So I think if it's all in one frame and in one direction, I think that's the best situation. But I really try to do things like the cups and balls, even for a large audience. And I consider it real. Every time I'm performing, I still consider it an exercise, a rehearsal, and just trying to learn how to project these simple things as simply as I can on this large audience, and use my whole body to communicate what's going on. I mean, there have been times in an audience of 150 or 200 people, and I'm going to do the rubber band tricks, the crazy man's handcuffs at one point, and I know these people can't even see the rubber bands in the back, but I'm going to try to learn to perform it so that they can understand what's going on, and really try to play it so big and try to use my whole body to communicate the effect. For me, it's always just an exercise in communication, and to use my whole body to communicate what's happening with the magic. And Lance Burton had a theater with 1,200 people in the theater, and he did the cups and balls without a big screen for years, and it was appreciate, and they loved it as much as anything else that they saw during the show, and because he sold it as a classic magician thing, and he's rolling his sleeves back and he's performing it, and it's a lesson, and I think the most fundamental thing that's happening in magic is communication, You're trying to get an idea into somebody else's head, and with words and body language and that sort of thing. And it's just a challenge as a communicator, to make it clear what's happening, even though what you're doing is small and intimate. I was in South Korea a number of years ago, and it was an outdoor show on a beach. 10,000 people watching this show, and they had a giant screen, a big, like a drive-in theater kind of screen at the back of the stage. And I'm going to do the rubber bands. I just love the idea of doing the rubber bands for 10,000 people, and seeing if I can really make this work. And it did. It worked. I mean, because I found where the camera guy was, and I go, watch this, look at this. Watch. 10,000 people reacting to a rubber band trick.
Nice.
And so yeah, something small can play big in the right way. I mean, I read about Emile Jarreau when he was performing in vaudeville, and his closing effect was the diamond penny transposition in a spectator's hand. They're holding a penny and he's got a dime, and he's making the coins change places. So here, those vaudeville theaters weren't as big as modern day theaters, maybe 100 to 200 people. But here this performer was, able to close his show with just two little coins inside somebody's hair. And it's just a matter of making people care about what they're seeing,
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And it's the challenge. That's always the challenge. How do you make them care?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very insightful.
You always change my thoughts, because I know you for performing close up in a very large audience setting and all that, and I always wondered how it's possible, because I don't want to be lugging around my big illusions, or I want to go there with rubber bands as well.
Yep. Well, years ago, I read something about salespeople, and this guy said, you should always imagine that on their forehead is a flashing sign that says "So what," and you're going to explain something to him, and this thing starts going, "So what? So what?" Well, because, and here's why it matters, and I think that that's probably good advice for a performer. Just you should perform in such a way that everybody's able to cause this flashing "so what" to appear on their forehead, and your job is to make sure they never turn that sign on by making it matter, and by connecting and presenting it in such a way that they care on some level.
Mm-hmm.
You get them to turn that "so what" sign off on their forehead.
Wow.
But yeah, it's interesting.
It's been a really, really insightful session with you, Michael. Thank you for sharing all your experiences with us.
Well, it's good to see you guys. It's amazing that we can do this.
Yeah.
And there you are,
Yes.
probably 7,000 miles away, and we get to talk like that.
Yeah.
I get to be in your living
have-
room, and you don't have to feed me. So there's the advantage.
I have one more request, because I really want you to share this story with everybody watching on Andrew's video, about Dai Vernon going to church.
It's a very funny story, and it's one of my favorite stories with the professor. And, I ended up, I got to where I wasn't sharing this story quite as often. I really wanted to make sure that everybody in the audience was I did it at a magic lecture one time, and some father brought his 12-year-old kid to see this magician. And I told this story, And then this guy sends me an email afterwards and says, I really didn't appreciate this. I'm there with my 12-year-old son. But I had to explain to him what you were talking about on the way home. And I just really wasn't prepared to go into that kind of conversation with my 12-year-old kid. And so I hope there's not any 12-year-old kids watching. Let's see if I can, hold on. Yeah, okay. Here, I got to just... I'm having a code here. So here's this story about the professor. So the professor was 8 years old at the time, and he says, I was 8 years old, and my father had gotten, his dad had got in expert at the card table and gave him a little pack of playing cards, and it already had this book for like a year and a half. He said, I was 8 years old and I was working on the overhand stacking systems in the back of the book, which is crazy because the overhand stacking stuff, it's like you're pulling off the top and the bottom and then 2, 3, 4, top and bottom,
milk,
2, 3, 4, top and bottom. Yeah, you're doing this milk stack. And said everywhere I would go, I would take this little pack of playing cards with me so that I could rehearse. He said one time I go to church. And I was late for church, and so all the seats were full, and I have to go down and sit in the front row, which, and I'm thinking, oh, no, I like to sit in the back so I can rehearse, I can practice with this deck of cards. So the whole time I'm walking to the front, I'm thinking, and then I had this great idea. He says, I took my coat off, and I put it in my lap, right? And that way I could practice under my coat. And so I'm sitting there, and you have to count to yourself, So it's like a 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. And says I'm doing this, and suddenly I hear everybody's gotten quiet, and I look up, and the preacher is looking right at me, and my first thought is, oh my God, he's caught me with a deck of cards. And he said again, he says, I thought like a magician, right? So I put the deck under my leg, right? Like this. And then I go, what? Nothing. He said, I didn't know until I was 12. I should have showed him the deck of cards. So this is very classic professor.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is the second time I'm hearing this. I'm still in tears. Oh my God.
But to hear the professor tell it, it was just, I only heard him tell it one time. What he would typically do, he had this regular set of stories that he would tell, and he would tell those. You really had to spend a lot of time with him to go into things that really weren't on that regular list of stories that he would tell. But that was my favorite. I should have shown him
my
the
favorite
deck.
too.
Yeah, he hated, I used to do rollover aces, the Derek Dingle routine. 26, 27,
renditions.
29, 30. All the cards are back in order. But royal flush and spades, royal flush, the professor didn't like this trick, and and I couldn't understand. Well, I don't get it, man. It's got the element of failure. It's got this riffle stacking, and there's all these different elements, and it's got ending. And he goes, that's the problem. He goes, he says, that's the problem. Too many endings. He said, if I could climax as many times as a Dingle routine, I'd be a happy man.
Wow. Thank you so much.
That's the professor.
Classic
Okay,
stories.
guys. Well, it's great to see you guys.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I don't know how many more years I'm going to be able to go around and do lecture tours, but I know that I want to go around at least one more time and see everybody. So I hope to see you guys again, live and in person.
Yeah, let's
before-
hope
when all this
this
stuff is over
pandemic
with.
will be over soon, that we can still travel, real soon. Yeah.
Yes, we want to visit as well. We want to visit.
Yeah.
So if not, we will meet at some conventions. Are you planning to go to Quebec in 2021? for FISM.
Oh, is that where FISM's going to be?
Mhm.
No.
Yeah,
In Cuba?
Quebec.
yeah, Quebec.
Is that what you said?
Yeah, Quebec.
I had no idea. Or Toronto. It's going to be in Toronto, isn't it?
The last I heard was
think it was
Quebec. Yeah, Quebec.
Oh, Quebec.
Quebec. Yeah,
Quebec. I thought you were saying
Quebec.
Cuba. Yeah. I think
Oh,
it's
no,
Toronto.
no. Quebec.
Yeah.
Quebec.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I will go to it. I think I will. It's
Oh.
nice to see it on the North American continent.
Yes.
So yeah, I think I'll be there. As long,
Hopefully,
I hope.
once everything is over,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Which is reasonable to think that it would be by then. But
By next month.
I
Get the
hope
vaccine
so.
by next month.
Yeah, really.
Uh,
Okay, fellas. Well, let's do this again sometime.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you.
Great to see you guys.
All right, then.
Take care.
I'll see you then. Well, guys, that is all from us today. If you like this video, hit that like button, comment below, and if you aren't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one.